but we can't stop once we're triggered. It's like you're
Right.
talking, and so many of these communication pieces, conflict in marriage, the approach, just thinking about that, I'm like, my approach is usually so childish and juvenile. And I don't even realize it, but it's because I'm so triggered. It's like, oh, yeah, well, what about this?
Right, right.
And we get nowhere. And then we're just fighting and nobody's talking, and it's bad.
I wanted to find out from you, what are you learning? What are you experiencing with all of the online training so far?
What I found is so helpful about it is when we are just left to our own, even though we see you so much, we're lucky enough to get to have you in person, but you can't be with us every day and every moment. And so what I found is I would go into some really unhealthy thought patterns without doing the videos, without doing the work. And when I started to do the work, it didn't happen. It was like I could have a much healthier perspective.
Mhm.
And it helped me to even realize things about myself that were going on that I didn't realize otherwise. Really, I think sweeping under the rug really was the first one that probably really smacked me in the face personally in the best way, because I think that I'm just being kind. I think that I'm being really Ruth. Ruth is what I told myself. I was just going to be Ruth, and I was just going to be selfless in this way. And I wasn't going to bring all the issues to my husband that I felt we were having, because I felt like they were just more of things I had fabricated were issues.
Mhm.
And they weren't important, is what I told myself.
Mhm.
And then when I started looking and watching the videos, I realized I was a bit of a liar. And I don't like liars or anything about them. And when I realized that I myself had taken on kind of a liar persona, really. And I was framing it as more of like victim of like, Ruth, I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to take this, and the Lord will rush in to my help when I need it. I'm just going to take it to him in prayer. And I think that we do need to take it to him in prayer. But I think that what your videos helped me to realize is if I don't take it to my husband, I'm really not being an authentic spouse the way that I think that I am,
Mhm.
because I'm actually hiding and lying.
You're hiding and lying. Yeah. And that's a hard thing for really sweet people to realize, because they're being so street sweet. They're usually people pleasers. They do more for others than themselves. And so to hit them with the truth that you're not being authentic, therefore you're lying, is hard for them to hear. I'm sure it was hard for you as well.
Yes. I watched that video a couple of times because I had to make sure I was understanding it correctly and it wasn't actually the victim that I had taken possession of. But honestly, if you would have told me I was a victim, I would have argued with you, I mean, to death,
Mm.
because I would have never believed that had it not been framed in the way that it was framed in Sweeping Under the Rug. You were able to paint the full picture of what is actually taking place. Like, here's the lie that you're probably believing, but here's what's actually taking place
Mhm.
in your marriage. And so it kind of helped me to shift the focus on my husband's doing all these things wrong, to wow, there's a lot of things I could do better. And I've definitely contributed to a lot of the problems in our marriage by hiding and also withdrawing. I did not realize what a withdrawer I was. I would tell you that I was an aggressor.
Really?
I would have
Really?
before
What's the
video.
differences? What are you learning about withdrawing and how you thought you were an aggressor?
Well, my friend pool is small because I am confrontational with safe people in my life. So if you can handle confrontation, then I'm going to confront you with issues to be an authentic friend. That's what I
You're
was thinking.
assertive. You're just assertive with issues and stuff. Okay.
Yes, I try not to, because I'm conscious of I don't want to ever develop a bitter root. So I would have told you that I thought that I was just way more assertive. But what I've realized when I'm up against somebody that's that much stronger than I am or more aggressive than I am, I'm actually a withdrawer. My husband's very aggressive, and I think early on in the marriage, he outshouted me. So I decided, okay, I can't win, so I'm just not, I'm going to choose not to fight. And if I do fight, it has to be a big enough battle that it's worth it to me. So I really pick and choose my battles.
Yeah. And so, I mean, a lot of men are much more, bellower people than the women. And finding that passive role becomes the dance. See, he becomes the pursuer, you become the distancer. And before you know it, you are shut down and repressed. And then thinking you are losing control because, he's aggressive, he has all the control. When really, the withdrawer has most of the control and the power because you can't make them talk.
Right.
You can't figure out what they're feeling. See, an assertive person is bellowing it out. What is he's feeling? Now, sometimes it's abusive, and you probably have felt some of that, but he's at least being vulnerable enough to speak his feelings out. Whereas you're not, you're holding that in. And so no one can make you talk, so guess who has the control?
Yes, yes.
That power game being played out, and the innocent person is the victim. And it keeps you your self-esteem starts tearing away little by little in that position because you lose your voice. You're not having your voice. And so then the question is, all right, how do I get my voice and be able to reason together without being plowed over by the aggressor in the relationship? What have you found that you can do better?
Well, marriage communication, I don't know how many times I've listened to it now. I've really needed to understand every piece. I think it might only be 13 minutes, but I have listened to that 13 minutes for many times now. And I think that to me, one of the most eye-opening things is when I was doing this, how unhealthy I was getting. So then it becomes like this internal blame game, and coming to the realization of what we need. And I remember even early on in this telling my husband, I long for true intimacy with you. And for him, intimacy is physical. And for me, intimacy is communicative. Like I need to connect with you. I need to be able to know where you are and locate you. And with the marriage communication, and when it's taught that we need to speak 8,000 words a day, our husbands need to speak 2,000 words a day, and they get their oxytocin from just those mindless things, video games, scrolling, TV, where we get it from communication with them and connecting with them. That was really eye-opening. So patio time, holy smokes, patio time has made me feel so seen and like I'm starting. I don't know that I'm confident that I fully locate him every day now, but I'm starting to be able to locate him and be able to pick up on things based on patio time and having that communication and the understanding that I also need to have a period when I'm communicating with my husband. I can go off on 100 tangents like many women, and I've lost him. There's no way he can practice the here response if I'm speaking in paragraphs every time we communicate. Mm-hmm. So just understanding that I need to be intentional with my communication with him, but just the awareness that he now understands what I need and I understand what he needs, that just really helps the harmonious experience at home.
Correct. And the reason the women do that word vomit thing on the guys with speaking in paragraphs and sometimes dissertations is because they're so starved from the communication, the intimate, sitting him down and he's got his eyes on you and he's engaged. They're so starved for that. So when you're getting it daily in the tiny little tool of patio time, and he knows what the rules are and you know what the rules are, it is so impactful because then you're not starving for it. And the biggest thing is you being able to express your own emotions and knowing where to locate his. See, because a lot of fulfillment for a woman comes through her being able to locate him. And the last thing guys want to talk about what they think. They want to talk about is their day. You know, they don't want to talk about how they killed this giant, how they did this bad thing, how they did this good thing. It's over for them, and they just want to veg out and be next to you. So for a man, it's not only sexual, but it's also when you're just, your body's there, they're content. Sit on the couch with me. They're content if your body is there. They don't need you to speak a word. And the woman is sitting there tapping her nails saying, what in the world I'm sitting here for? Because she doesn't understand that that brings him a comfort, but he doesn't understand that she needs just a little bit of engagement from him. And if she can get that, it fulfills her so much. So when that tool is given to the men and they're willing to do it, you know, my guys at least do what I tell them to do, thankfully, they get the reward because they get y'all off their backs. You know, they just want you off their backs. So they do it for that reward only. But then it's fulfilling to them because there are periods now. See, there are not the paragraphs, there's not the dissertation anymore. And he gets lost, like you said, they get lost in all of the minutia because you are just vomiting everything you've wanted to talk to him for days and days and days and days because you finally got his attention. You know, it's no different for the guys because when the guys are, you know, I always say hugging you when you're washing the dishes, you know, the woman can't lean into that because she knows he's gonna, she's ready. If she leans into that, he's pushing her to the bedroom and she's got to figure out the dishes and what's gonna happen next for her homework. So we don't engage in those things. And when there's order and understanding of what each person needs and how the oxytocin is actually distributed in each person's brain, I think it helps so much, just the framework of learning it.
It does. It does. It makes me think of when I pray for a revelation in a situation I can't see the whole picture of. Mm-hmm. And that's what this has done for me. Is it allowed me, I was getting so, like you were talking about, you know, condemnation versus shame. Mm-hmm. And how that the Lord just lovingly, he's just so gentle in his approach, but Satan's so aggressive. And so it's like these whys. Well, what was he thinking? Well, what if this happened? What if that? What if that? And that's where I would find myself going. And then I would put on the videos and it was like, okay, here is the full picture. Here I am. What do I want to agree with? And it just really helped me understand and have revelation of the warfare and what was actually going on around me. Because our emotions are good. God gave us these emotions, but when we lean into them too much and we're driven by our emotions, it usually doesn't end up good. And I, you know, I feel like I'm old enough to know better in those scenarios, but we can't stop once we're triggered. It's like you're talking, and so many of these communication pieces, you know, conflict in marriage, the approach. Just thinking about that, I'm like, my approach is usually so childish and juvenile, and I don't even realize it, but it's because I'm so triggered. It's like, oh yeah, well, what about this?
Right.
And we get nowhere, and then we're just fighting, and nobody's talking, and it's bad.
Well, we wind up being 10-year-olds on the playground fighting the trigger, you know, and then just learning about your triggers and learning how you developed. I mean, you know, we're humans and we all have family of origin stuff back there that, you know, whatever opinion people have about whatever happened to them. And some of it can be really bad. Some of it's not necessarily bad, but it creates a coping mechanism that then when we're triggered by something that we have either misread, misunderstood, judged, or something, and not got the full picture of what's going on in the communication because we haven't stopped it long enough, the trigger comes up and it's like the whole thing is set off a landmine, and it gets people to divorce if we can just talk about it. You know, the scripture says, come, let us reason together. Most people that will sit down and really be vulnerable and say, okay, this is what's triggering me. This is why it's triggering me. And if your partner really loves and cares about you and wants to understand, it can switch the paradigm so fast. And before you know it, you're no longer fighting, but now you're holding hands or watching a movie or making love or whatever fun thing you want to do together, and you feel paired.